Hey guys, do you know someone considering renting their property as an Airbnb? I have worked with Rental Advisor for over a decade, and Rental Advisor provides free rental projections to prospective owners, realtors, and investors for any property in the US. So if you know someone considering getting into the vacation rental industry, have them email management@myrentaladvisor.com to get their free revenue projections. Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's show. Today, I am joined by Marilee Boyack and Luke Hansen, who are going to be joining me to discuss and review some content that Faith Matters has recently, or I don't know how recently it was, put it out a little while ago on their channel, but we want to review some of that today. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. So real quick.
And this was just before Roe v. Wade.
Yes.
It was when the leak happened. And so
Okay,
it looked like it was going to
happened.
happen, but it didn't happen yet. Yeah, that's when it was recorded.
Perfect. So the reason I wanted to discuss this was because I actually had gone through and had, I've been watching some of Faith Matters stuff. I see it popping up on my social media all the time. They're obviously in this world of sort of the Latter-day Saint online discussion world. And I've been kind of, some of their stuff they put out, honestly, in fact, I may even say the majority of what they put out is quite good. But it's sort of like some of it is shocking to me. And I always say, glass, if it's out where everyone can see it, people know to avoid it. But if you put glass inside of a birthday cake, that's the most dangerous thing. And so in this discussion, I wanted to sort of review what they were talking about. And Luke, tell everyone.
You cut out a bit there. What did you say?
Oh, sorry. Apparently my internet signal's kind of cutting in and out here. I have to edit that out. Well, real quick, Luke, you are involved pretty aggressive at BYU. You are the head of the BYU Conservatives. Is that correct?
Yeah, we changed our name to Cougar Chronicle recently just because of copyright stuff, but I'm kind of a co-founder, I guess you could say, of that group social media page thing.
Awesome. And Marilee, what tell them a little about your background.
I'm the Director of Development for Pro-Life Utah. I'm also the Director of Development for Latter-day Saints for Life, and I'm the Chairman of the Abortion-Free Utah Coalition. So I've been working in pro-family, pro-life work for decades, probably before you young pups were even born. Long time.
Well, good for you. We're happy to join you now. Now, one thing I want to just make clear to the audience here. This discussion, we are not gathering as a group of political activists here. Okay, that's not what I wanted to do here. I wanted to gather as Latter-day Saints to discuss this topic from the perspective of a Latter-day Saint, because those on Faith Matters are also Latter-day Saints. And so you would assume that we should all, under the doctrines and teachings of the gospel, come up with a relatively consistent set of ideas about what we should believe when it comes to matters of abortion. And I wanted to kind of contrast some of that. And, but I want to make that clear that I don't want people to think that, oh, this is just a political battle and therefore it is outside the realm of discussion. So Marilee, do you have a comment about that?
Can I comment to that? We encounter this a lot particularly in the LDS arena, where they say, oh, it's political. And I say, isn't it fascinating how effective Satan has been? All he had to do was attach the term political to a doctrinal issue. And immediately he got the mute button, because so many of the saints are like, ooh, we can't talk about this. It's political. We can't go there. When in fact, this is about the most fundamental doctrine, other than the nature of God, that you can encounter. So I never shy away from that. The minute they say it's political, I say, no, it's not. No, it's not. This is fundamental to all of us.
If anything was a moral issue, the sanctity of life, I think, has to rank up there in the highest levels of the, we're not talking about what the next tax policy is going to be on a particular type of corporation. This is about whether or not a human being is a human being, and when, if you can terminate human life. I mean, so yes, so we are approaching this from a moral viewpoint and relying upon the view of the Latter-day Saints and the church. And so I think we'll just dig right into the clips if you guys are all right with that.
Go for it.
Okay. And I was going to just go in order of the clips that you prepared, Luke. Is that cool?
Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay.
Oh, and quick thing, Luke Hansen and I share the same last name, although his is O-N. So we are not
spelled
related.
Properly. Yes.
No, the Danish had it right.
Oh, brother.
The son of Han. No.
All right, so let's just dig right in.
I'll make a little comment before we play this. This was like a 45 to 55 minute long discussion that they had, and obviously we can't just sit here and watch the whole thing. So I have edited it and tried to put their ideas into little 40-second packages. So I don't want to be accused of of people saying, oh, you just did this to make them look bad or anything. No, I tried to capture the idea, but put it into a 40-second, segment that we could react to.
Absolutely. And I want to make everybody aware, I'm going to link the full discussion. So please, I encourage you to go and listen to their full discussion. So I don't want to straw man anything. And anyone associated with Faith Matters, anyone associated with this podcast that we review today, if you feel that we've misrepresented you, if something is not right, I want to preemptively apologize and invite you onto my show to make that clarification. I don't want to paint anybody the wrong way. I think based on what I saw, I think your edits were very fair to what the discussion was. And so I think we can start to review some of that. So let me delve right into this. So they're beginning here just talking about the fact that Roe v. Wade is potentially going to be overturned here. And they're kind of discussing what they refer to as a moral dilemma. So we'll start here with that clip. And if you guys can't hear it, please let me know.
A moral dilemma is when there are competing goods, on both sides, and you need to choose which is the higher good. What's really at stake in this debate?
I think naturally, if we look at a pro-life perspective, right, we see that this life that is vulnerable is being, in terms of abortion, just discarded, as you described. If we look at the pro-choice side, we can see how a woman's autonomy and her body matters, and all of the implications. I think many would say, well, for a child to be born into a really difficult situation, is that doing good for a child, right? And so just questions, I think, about value and whose values, and to just really take those seriously.
Okay. So I'm going to let Mary Lee, do you want to give your thoughts just initially on that? I'll go last here.
This is touching into the moral relativism, right? Where they're saying, well, we have to weigh these moral values. We have this woman that's going to be impacted, for a whopping 9 months. And, we have this child. To me, that does not play well. It's as if you have equal and competing issues going on, and we don't. We have the baby's right to exist, the right to live, versus this woman having, a challenge for a period of time. And I've had 4 babies, don't get me wrong. I know how hard that challenge can be. But I think trying to make them equal is rather disingenuous. And then I hear this argument, and we hear this in our work, where people will say, are you doing any good by having that child born into a difficult situation? I mean, frankly, that's rather absurd. Oh, you're right. They would have rather be dead. What were we thinking?
I've always
really.
That's honestly, it shocked me to be like, wait a minute here, you guys. Why would you even on this podcast say that? Yeah. Why would you tender that as a legitimate sort of like moral dilemma? You're talking about killing a baby. It's like, well, the baby might have a rough life. Right. Well, it's like, all right, well, my 2-year-old might have a rough life. When I lose my job, my wife gets divorced, and I have all this stuff. Let's just off it.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Yeah. This is not a question about of legitimate. Oh, well, we got these competing goods. It's and the other thing's like, well, and what about the autonomy of the mother? What about the autonomy of the baby?
Right. The existence. I mean, you have existence versus inconvenience. And they try to make those equal. Oh my gosh, not even close. Well, and I encounter people that have a different, that are pro-abortion. By the way, I never use the term pro-choice. It is pro-abortion. Let us be clear on that. And I remember this young woman who had a very difficult life. She'd been through foster care, been abused. I mean, very, very difficult. And she was arguing that we shouldn't bring these children into this. And I stopped her and I said, would you rather be dead now? Would you rather be dead? And she kind of had to sit back and acknowledge, no, I'm glad I'm alive. I go, there you go. That's the issue.
I'll do devil's advocate a little bit for this woman. It's possible that the tactic she's taking is, well, I want to acknowledge and respect the deeply held feelings of other people and bring them into the conversation also. But I would say this isn't the way that you do it. If you actually are pro-life, then be pro-life. Because she sets it up as, well, obviously we're coming from a pro-life perspective in the LDS faith. But when we look at it, it's like, just because you state somebody's opinion in a very sincere voice, that doesn't mean it's valid. Like, we need to actually look at it instead of just hearing each other.
Well, and there's something to be said for saying, no, that's not a legitimate, there's sort of like, we have to validate all opinions. I'm sorry. Some opinions are not valid. They're not only are they not valid, they're abhorrent. Like, if I came in and was like, well, I'm sorry, am I breaking up here? My internet's giving me a little trouble.
Your audio's fine.
Okay, cool.
It's just fuzzy.
Okay, that's fine. But I want to, it's this idea of, I always like to spin it around and say, if someone, I know that you think other races are inferior. And that's if someone
and they do get lower test scores. So
yeah,
there's some,
yeah, it's like, you don't look at that and say, this is we have two different opinions. And it's like, no, that opinion is wrong. It is wrong to state that a woman's quote unquote choice to do what? To kill the baby. I'm sorry, that's not a legitimate choice. That's an immoral choice.
And you hear this in the dialogue all the time. Among those who are pro-abortion, they do not like to talk about the baby at all. They try to dehumanize it to the point where one of my all-time favorite clips is from a senator in the state of Utah who called it the contents of the uterus. And this guy was purportedly LDS. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah, that's called a baby. But they dehumanize it. They minimize it. They talk about it being, a clump of cells. Or they just don't talk about it at all. They talk about the woman and her issues and what she's facing. And they just don't want to talk about it.
Well, that's the thing.
It makes it easier. It makes it more palatable to kill it.
No one denies the fact that this is something that can be very traumatic, very difficult, painful, all of that. Like, we agree, but it doesn't justify it. Nothing justifies it. And in fact, I wanted to play this clip. President Nelson, our current prophet, gave the seminal talk on the issue of abortion ever given. And everyone should listen to it because it is absolutely brilliant. And let me tell you, I want to just ask you, as we all listen to this clip, does he frame this as a moral dilemma of competing goods?
Servant of the Lord, I dutifully warn those who advocate and practice abortion that they incur the wrath of Almighty God, who declared, if man hurt a woman with child so that her fruit depart from her, he shall be surely punished. Of those who shed innocent blood, a prophet declared, the judgments which God shall exercise in his wrath shall be just, and the blood of the innocent shall stand as a witness against them, yea, and cry mightily against them at the last day. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has consistently opposed the practice of abortion. 100 years ago, the first presidency wrote, and we again take this opportunity of warning the Latter-day Saints against those practices of feticide and infanticide. Why destroy a life that...
So for those of you who think that, oh, you guys are being really harsh and, all this kind of stuff, I just wanted to no, we are echoing what the Lord's servants have said on this matter consistently over time. And they have not minced words, and they have not framed it as a moral dilemma of competing goods. Okay. It's a fairly clear issue. Now let's go on here to clip 2. Let me pull this up real fast. And they have, in this one, they talk a little bit about sort of the moral high ground. So let's go to this clip real fast. Let me pull it up. Okay.
One of the things that comes up, I think, is you'll hear strong, right, like this moral position, this moral high ground by people. I take the moral high ground
Yes.
of valuing the life of the child. And I'll hear people I respect very much say, I take the moral high ground of this woman having a right to make this decision that's going to have so many implications for her life. The hard thing is just to uncover, rather than grappling with that debate and right, who's the moral high ground, is figuring out, how are we in a situation like this in the first place? Why are women in such a desperate situation that they are having to make a choice, right? It's not like you choose it because you want it. It's because you're in a desperate situation, resulting in this need for this destructive act.
Okay, so just before I even get to it, I just couldn't help but notice, like, that is not the language, taking the moral high ground as if that was somehow a problem. I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure the prophet of God, just in that clip we just watched, and if you watch anything, we take the moral high ground. We establish where the moral high ground is, and we say the moral high ground is to honor the life of a newborn baby. And I don't know, again, it's just like, I don't understand this language. And to be fair, the sister in that clip, I can't remember her name, she is ultimately wants to protect the baby and believes that abortion is wrong. But this sort of soft playing it opens up the door as if it's sort of like someone soft playing racism. Like, you don't soft play racism. It's wrong. Like, we can draw clear moral lines here.
And then this just goes into your debate rhetoric tactics of just sort of dismissing arguments out of hand because they're claiming the moral high ground, but you're doing that so that you can claim the moral high ground for my approach is better. So I don't understand the dissing it and then grabbing that point at the same time that she's doing. And what she's essentially trying to say is, well, we don't have Zion yet, so let's dig deep into why we're not Zion yet instead of talking about this side issue. It's like, well, no, Zion isn't achieved by just having these grandiose visions and listening deeply to people, and then all of a sudden we get there. It's a step-by-step process. One of the first and most important steps would be, let's outlaw killing people. That would be an important step towards Zion. So I understand if abortion gets outlawed, the world still has a ton of problems. I don't know anybody in the pro-life position who thinks that passing a certain law is the be-all, end-all, but it is an important step, and just dismissing it and saying, well, let's talk about these more esoteric, bigger picture issues is not really going to get us anywhere, in my opinion.
Well, and it's a deflective argument. It's to say, talking about killing a baby is uncomfortable, so let's go over here. It's the Wizard of Oz approach of, well, let's talk about how she got there to begin with and what we can do to solve that. Okay, very good, very valid conversation. But do not dismiss the critical decision that is being made and the conversation is being made about whether or not she can kill that baby. You know what I mean? But They try to deflect. And you'll see in some of the other clips that we're going to look at the same tactic of, look over here, but look over here and look over here. Same tactic.
Let's pull up the next clip, because it definitely does go into that here.
So this next clip, while you're pulling it up, is her talking about a study that somebody did in Philadelphia. Why does abortion happen if there's still access to contraceptives?
Why are women still having children in these very difficult situations? These are women who've grown up in very difficult situations. Many of them had not ever seen an intact marriage. They became involved with men, the men who were their friends and around them. And so they're involved in these with these men sexually. As would happen, there was this hunger for stable relationships.
As would happen, that was a little bit problematic to me. But let's, sex doesn't just, as it happens, people start having sex with each other outside of marriage. But
not with her daughters, but those other people.
I know. Well, we'll get to that in a minute, because I know you have some comments on that.
And maybe a baby would secure that. Now, maybe she gets pregnant because she's not consistently using contraception. She's facing this decision of what it means to actually have life. and then abortion becomes an attractive option. There is so much underneath here that we need to unpack. I want to get at healing that world that they are in. But we get to the real root of what those needs are. It's not going to be disassociation rights. It's going to be finding ways to heal connection.
Luke, I'll let you have the first go at this clip.
Yeah, we're really on the euphemism treadmill right now. Disassociation rights, abandoning a life, discarding a life. What makes that need to happen, as would happen, you know, all these phrases and words that are being used that are just serving to cloud the issue rather than provide any clarity on it. Because we stopped in the middle, I'll briefly kind of go over her argument one more time. There's these women, this is mostly referring to inner city type of people, Black, frankly, people who are in, you know, everybody's in a broken home situation for the most part. And so the woman is looking for connection. And so she's not really too intent on preventing a baby, because maybe a baby will provide an opportunity for her and whatever the man is to come together and be in a more stable relationship because of that child. But then once they actually get pregnant, they go, ooh, maybe not. And then abortion is an option. That's her argument.
She posed a question earlier of like, you know, why do these things happen? Like, why does it? You guys, it's not complicated. Like, we know how it happens. Like, if you've been to the SHARE program in the 3rd grade or the sex ed program, like anyone would know that, hey, when you engage in sex, babies can result. And that's why, and it's sort of like, well, what do we do about this? In my mind,
and here's the thing, and this is going to pop up a little bit in the next clip when the host talks about their privilege, but I'm positive that I'm sure she would be very loving and understanding towards her own daughter if she got into some trouble in that respect. But as a parent, I imagine she's a parent, one of her main goals is to make sure that the children understand the role of sex, the role of marriage, the role of all these things as LDS people. But then suddenly when we're talking about, frankly, inner city Blacks, then it gets into this, well, as would happen, or they don't use contraceptives, or this and that. And I completely understand the privilege argument of, yeah, it's way harder to produce a strong, loving family out of that situation than it is from a, you know, Provo, Salt Lake City, Utah Mormon family. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to expect that of them, or try to, you know, exert our influence in the culture to try to make that a possibility, instead of the soft bigotry of low expectations of just saying, as would happen, oh, they need connection, maybe we should just go listen to them, and then we can really feel deep things, and that can, I don't know what's going to happen from that, but something important is going to happen from that. So
well, look at what she's equating. We need to heal them. We need, and she's kind of, in essence, opening the door for, so let her kill her baby, because we just need to work on healing. And they trot that out as if, man, that's the only choice they had, you know, because they're in these desperate circumstances. It's the only choice. And what they fail to talk about is, if you allow or keep or encourage or whatever word and terminology you want to use for that woman to have an abortion, they fail to talk about the lifelong mental health and possibly physical health impacts to that woman, the impacts to her moral development and spiritual development. I mean, think of the disconnect that they have to have in order to do that most vicious act to their own child. And you're offering this as healing and connection? No. You know, offering that to a woman, suggesting that, enabling that, opening the door to that, saying that that's okay, all leads to horrible, horrible, horrible outcomes, not only for that baby, but for that woman, for the father, for the family. You know, it's just this terrible alternative, and they just act like,
and to be fair, I don't know if the and I need to remember her name, the woman in this,
Erickson. Mm-hmm.
What is it?
I believe it's Jeanette Erickson.
Jeanette, that's right, Jeanette. So to be fair to Jeanette, I don't know that she would make the case, oh, it's okay. But I would say that what's happening here is, and I think you kind of hit it, Luke, where it's this low expectations. Mm-hmm. Would you talk this way to your daughter? Would you say, oh, sex happens, and you maybe get pregnant, and then, oh, it's so tough. Like, you just need connection. It's like, no, you tell your kid, no, you do not have sex until you are married. that is the standard that you will live by, because the consequences of doing otherwise are immense, they're grave, and they're serious. You don't soft play it, right? But you're right. There's sort of this, and I also want to be careful not to equate it that, that she means inner city Black specifically, but certainly inner city people that are lower educated, that are of whatever racial group they are. Obviously, many, many, many of them are Black, but it's this, I'm going to you people, I'm going to talk about, we need to come in and heal you, as though it's us as the saviors who can come in here and can just hug the bad out of this situation, where in reality, it's teaching people personal responsibility and agency that ultimately empowers them to say, this is your choice and you are responsible for it. And if you make the choice to have sex, there are consequences that you cannot avoid. And so you better be very careful about that choice. And I'm sorry, I think I'll touch on this in the next clip. Yeah, because I think she hits on it here in the next clip.
Yeah, and I'll be clear, she's obviously pro-life. And I would say probably obviously not racist, so I don't want to make it sound like we're saying these things.
This is the danger. This is the danger.
It's just what's the worldview? Are we coming at from a different angle that's going to make us wind up in not the place we want to be?
We have a danger, I think, in the LDS community that is very loving and very embracing and very inclusive. This whole scoop it all in, kumbaya, acknowledge all things as equal. That can be a little bit dangerous, because it gives the message to our young people and to others of, these are all just choices. These are all just, balancing rights. These are all just ways people with, difficult
moral dilemmas, right? They're all just competing goods.
And so there is this very confused messaging, in my opinion. And I think Latter-day Saints need to be very careful about that. I take my cue from the Brethren. They are very loving in their approach, but holy cow, I mean, listen to President Nelson there when he was an apostle, clear, direct, unapologetic about this is the Lord's way, this is the right way. I get that we need to strike that balance, but I think in today's world, they're tipping way too far in this open tolerance of all of this.
Well, and I always equate it to bigotry and racism, because in today's day and age, that is the one sin that you can speak out firmly against, and there's no toleration for it. And frankly, it's like, I agree, good,
and no toleration for people in the past.
Yeah. And here's the thing: that's one sin. Why don't we talk about the other ones? Like, we don't tolerate sin, and not only that, especially grave sin like this. I mean, this is abortion we're talking about here. Yeah. This isn't, your kid stole a candy bar when he was 5 years old. You know what I mean? This is serious, life-altering things. So let's move on here for the sake of time to clip number 4, where we're going to be talking about privilege.
And personally, like this really is something that I feel like I'm still forming an opinion about. I feel like I can sense that there is so much I don't understand about this issue. And I think a lot of it has to do with privilege.
Okay, hold on. I just want to make a quick comment here. If you're a Latter-day Saint adult who's out podcasting and you still have not formed your opinion on the matter of abortion, like, what?
What?
Have you not watched everything our apostles and prophets have taught on this matter since forever? I mean, it's not an unclear issue here. And she's talking about, I kind of have privilege because I don't have to deal with having the choice. Do I need to get an abortion? Well, I'll tell you where that privilege came from. It came from this. It came from the fact that you have a mother and father who probably taught you well, and you were taught the principles of the family proclamation. And because of that, you were able to avoid what they call that the disintegration of the family and these values will bring upon individuals, communities, and nations calamities. Your privilege came as because people took personal responsibility. They didn't abort you. Just a quick story, just so everyone knows where I come from here. My father was conceived by my grandmother when she was 15 in the 1950s. They weren't married at the time. Okay? And let me tell you, in 1950s America, in the church, when you're a 15-year-old who's pregnant, that's a big deal. But guess what? They had the chance. They were considering doing abortion, but guess what? Abortion was not legal at that time. And it was partly because it was illegal that my grandmother, that was part of the factors, not all, but she made the choice to keep my father. My grandmother went on to have 8 children. Okay? People have served missions or serving in government who are all sorts. She has 50, 60 some odd, I can't remember how many, like now to probably 70, including her great-grandchildren, who were born because she made the right choice. But the privilege that I enjoy was because people took responsibility. So when I hear somebody say, oh, I'm not 100% sure on this issue, it's muddy, it's unclear, this is a moral dilemma. Like, no, it's not. You're a Latter-day Saint, right? I'm sorry, I kind of had to. That one got to me.
Oh, for sure.
So, anyway, any other thoughts on that before I have a clip I wanted to play on where President Hinckley talks about some of this.
Well, honestly, when we're talking about privilege, you have the privilege of making choices of whether or not to have sex, period. You have that privilege.
Yes.
I don't care if you're rich, poor, white, black, from a different country. I don't care.
Why is it that we have such high
expectations? Sometimes, well, you have to discount my opinion because I'm white. No, we don't.
Why is it that we can set such high expectations for our children and for ourselves? But when it comes to other people, we have to, I understand being empathetic towards people, but you don't help people by setting a low bar for them.
I think our culture is, and especially Latter-day Saint culture, has this idea of we can't use the law to do anything, even if it's a moral thing. Which is, I think, partly, I don't think we should outlaw alcohol throughout the whole United States, for example. And that's not the church's position. That's just mine. But that doesn't mean that the law plays no role in morality whatsoever. The argument you're trying to legislate your own morality doesn't make any sense. Every law is the general consensus of the population's concept of morality at that given time. So I'm completely fine with if most of the population recognizes abortion is murder. Sorry, I shouldn't say murder, because then that makes it sound like the woman's doing it, but a killing of a child, then I'm completely fine that the 70% of the population that firmly believes that enforces their version of morality on the 30% who thinks it's completely fine. I have no problem with that.
And excuse me, what more basic function of law is there than the protection of life? You're going to say that the law shouldn't protect life? Are you out of your mind? That's that's the first step. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't know if there's any more basic function of government than the protection of life.
I just gave that very testimony in our abortion bill in this legislative session, where people say, oh, you're trying to force your morality on us or your religion on us. And we say, no, protection of life, liberty, and happiness. Life was first for a reason. A reason. It's the most fundamental role of the government, period. That's why we have safety services. That's why we have military. It is all preservation of life. So, having the government step into this arena, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to play a little clip from President Hinckley, especially considering the story that I've heard that I've experienced in my own family and others, about, if a woman's faced with abortion, or with a pregnancy that is unintended and a bad situation, which does happen. And I'll be the first one to empathize with that very, very difficult situation. But President Hinckley, I think he just, again, I don't know how you can be confused about I'm trying to figure this out still when the prophets have been so clear. So I want to play this clip from him about how, women can handle or what we should do when we're faced with the situation where you have a baby that is born in a woman's pregnant in a bad situation.
Abortion is not the answer. This only compounds the problem. It is an evil and repulsive escape that will someday bring regret and remorse. Marriage is the more honorable thing. This means facing up to responsibility. It means giving the child a name with parents who together can nurture, protect, and love. When marriage is not possible, experience has shown that adoption, difficult though this may be for the young mother, may afford a greater opportunity for the child to live a life of happiness.
There's a tragic irony in the multitude of children eliminated or injured before birth, while throngs of infertile couples long for and seek babies to adopt.
So it's funny that, you know, what is President Hinckley, what was he saying? He was saying basically that you got to take responsibility, right? Like, that's the empowering message. It's, yes, there was a bad choice made, but now you can make the right choice. Like, again, moral dilemma, competing goods, or take personal responsibility for your sexual behavior and either marriage or adoption to save that life. Any other thoughts on that before I cue up the next clip?
One of the things
and this
that-
woman,
Oh,
sorry. Okay. This woman, I keep forgetting her name, but
Janet.
I think I included it in a clip. She does basically say what President Hinckley said, is abortion seems like it's an escape or a solution, but it's actually not. So to be fair to her, she does make this argument, but just these terms that it's couched in makes it a very wishy-washy and kind of like a, and you could come to your own conclusion about this type of presentation.
Yeah, as if there are multiple moral options available when it comes to abortion.
And I think the hosts are more in that camp. I think
Yeah.
if anything, the woman who's using this very couch language, very euphemistic language, is more pro-life.
And I think
than
it's
they are.
emblematic of niceness in Mormonism, right? You're
Mhm.
dealing with someone who, it seems that the hosts have a much more pro-abortion sort of view, and they're very, very nicely, softly, instead of confronting it and saying, no, let's make distinctions here that are very clear. This is wrong and this is right. So, all right,
And-
let's
And I
go
think
ahead.
one of
Millie.
the things that I learned when I got involved in pro-life work was I used to pray and pray and pray for the mothers to love their babies so that they wouldn't kill them. And then I realized as I got more involved in this work that over 75% of the women that are seeking abortion are doing so under pressure from their boyfriend, from their husband, from their family members. And so I think that there is a role to play as members in that circumstance when that happens, to the, you know, I'll say exert a positive pressure on no, you know, we need, you know, you need to give life and we will support you and we will help you. There are so many supports out there for women that find themselves in these circumstances. You know, in fact, we always get accused by Planned Parenthood and the like of, what do you do for women? And then we list off. I mean, we give them life grants up to $3,000, baby supplies for a year. We assign them to, you know, mentors to be with them and hold their hand the entire time. I mean, the list is long of the support that is available. And it isn't just in the state of Utah. There is support available all over the place. And particularly within the church, we have support available to women that and girls that find themselves dealing with this issue. And so this fatalism of, you know, they only have one choice, you know, not true. I think that, you know, President Hinckley just hit it right on the head of, if you choose this path, it will be a lifetime of pain, regret. The suicide rate goes through the roof. I mean, it really is quite significant. But this other alternative of taking responsibility for what has occurred, moving forward and, you know, with that choice of life in the best way that you can for that baby, that is an empowering decision. That is an empowering message of, yes, you did this, but look what good you can do now. What good can come from this? That's a major message that I think we as members of the church, instead of you know, staying very negative, we can choose this position of support that will make the difference in life.
Absolutely. In this next clip, it was shocking to me that the host would claim that this was what he considered the strongest argument for what he calls the pro-choice movement. It was actually, I was pretty shocked by it, to be honest.
but it ignores a tremendous reality, which is there is inherently a sexual asymmetry between men and women.
That makes a ton of sense. I think that's one of the strongest arguments I've seen from the pro-choice side, is that, say we suddenly begin to live in a world where Roe is overturned, it's really not too much of a stretch to see that state of the world as somewhat inherently misogynistic, because women bear such a greater burden. Perhaps you could call it an undue burden compared to men who, at least as I understand it, bear no legal responsibility.
So I'm just going to pause it there. Oof. So let's first of all try and summarize what his argument is. The idea is, if Roe v. Wade is overturned and abortion is restricted, that leads to misogyny because women can't get abortions and men bear no legal responsibility. That's more or less his. Is that how you heard it, Luke? Let's give it to you first.
Yeah, and because of time, full context of the clip, that's not what the woman whose name I keep forgetting was trying to say. She was trying to say, we can't use abortion to try to turn women into men. We need to acknowledge that difference. And then he kind of jumps in. I'd say it's more of a Marxist worldview. If you have the oppressed and the oppressors, and anytime there's some sort of imbalance, something's very bad, and we need to, run around like our heads are cut off and do something about it. So,
well, and the crazy thing here is that, what are you saying? You're saying that if we don't allow women to kill their babies, we won't have equality, or as they would probably say it, equity, right?
Or the reverse. Yep. In order to have equity, we have to allow the woman to kill her baby. In order to have an equal playing field, we have.
And that is the strongest argument.
Third.
That's the best you guys got.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. If you're coming from this worldview, if you're coming from the oppressed oppressors critical theory worldview, then that's how you're going to look at it, and it's going to look like a very strong argument to you. And you'll notice that he used the undue burden. He said that would appear to do an undue burden, and you can see he looks at. We haven't really gotten to the guy who's the other guest on the show, but he's part of the J. Reuben Clark Law School. So he's using this legal term and looking at him to try to get confirmation, like, am I using this right? Legally, we could make the case, kind of like that moral equivalence that he started the discussion off with.
He's trying to make the legal connection to say, if women don't have the right to abortion, they are subject to, under legal terms, an undue burden, and therefore that undue burden merits the legalization of allowing them to kill their child.
And that undue burden is emergent from the God-given differences between men and women, namely that women have uteruses.
Yes. And that is inherently unfair. There's an inherent asymmetry in our natural biology, and therefore we needed to utilize the law to allow women to kill their babies. Remember, it's so funny though. We need to allow women to have this choice after they've had sex, because we cannot expect women or men to control themselves beforehand. And here's the worst thing about it is I just forgot the point I was going to make, is that you're arguing that a woman's choice, well, that's the thing, the choice to do what? It's the choice to murder the baby. Your choice was to have sex or not. Oh, this is what I was going to say. And then he says, and men bear no legal responsibility. Bro, have you ever heard of child support laws?
But then he looks to the lawyer guy to back him up, and let's play the lawyer guy's response.
Yeah. Okay.
And I apologize for calling him a lawyer guy. I should have looked at people's names before.
Let me come back here. I'll pull it up. Let me get this up.
Maybe go back like 5 seconds.
An undue burden compared to men who, at least as I understand it, bear no legal responsibility.
Well, I'm not sure if that there's the law in the books and there's the law in practice, and I think that fortunately it describes the law in practice to a large extent.
Okay, full disclosure, I'm an estate planning attorney. And I cried baloney. Baloney. these women go for child support all the live long day, as they well should, and as that child deserves. In fact, Utah went so far as to pass a law that when a woman finds out she's pregnant, the father of the baby is responsible for 1/2 of all her medical expenses and everything. So Utah went even a step further on that one. So this whole argument that the women are stuck and the men go off scot-free, just completely fallacious.
That is the natural way. That is, if you don't have child support laws that hook the man in, then yes, you can end up in that situation. That's why I'm a big supporter of forcing through the government that, no, sir, if you are involved in creating this child, you are going to take care of that child. And the challenge is, what if and which is not uncommon, is that the woman and the man have no desire to be together or do this together. And so the law does the best that we can to try and make sure that the man doesn't get off scotch-free. But to act as though they don't, I just think every guy who's ever dealt with child support issues or law is just going, what? And this is similar and he says, the thing is look at what he does. He does the nice Mormon thing. He says, well, what he should have said is, actually, you're wrong. But instead of that, he doesn't want to do that because he's a nice Mormon guy, and nice Mormons say, well, it is
the way that you're right.
wrong, but let me tell you where you're right because I want to be nice. And
boy, we use this in the pro-life work in when I created Abortion Free Utah Coalition. And one of the things I said over and over is, we have been nice for decades. For 50 years, we have been nice. And in 50 years, 63 million babies have been killed in the United States. And worldwide, we have approximately over 70 million babies a year are being aborted through mostly elective abortion, 99% through elective abortion. Yeah, not only are LDS people too nice, the world is too nice. And I think, when we look at, I compare this to Nazi Germany, where all the people were just kind of going around, Germans were going around, their lives and being nice, and all of this horror was occurring. We see the same thing here, where this horror is occurring in our world and up the freeway from me and everywhere. And we just want to be nice, and we just kind of want to let things go, and we kind of deflect that. But, as I've said over and over again, when people said, how could you get involved in this work? And I said, I want to be able to look at my children and my grandchildren and say, I knew this horrible thing was occurring, and I actually did something about it.
That's great. I agree.
And I think we need to do that. And instead of just being nice all the time, we need to do something about it.
I agree.
Yeah, even if you're taking like I want the world to like me perspective on this, and that's kind of your motivation, I think there's still an extremely strong case for a staunchly pro-life position, because the way that history is going to look at you, I mean, look at what people say about George Washington, his high moral standards, all the amazing things that he did, and then they just yell about him having slaves, day in and day out. And so it's okay, well, you've not done nearly anything as good as George Washington. And you're being very kind of wishy-washy the way on abortion, like he was on slavery. I would say that, in a couple decades, that history might not like that very much.
I agree.
I hope.
Let me pull up this clip. Again, I just contrasting as much as I can what our prophets and apostles have said on these issues. Both, I played some older clips. We're going to see Elder Anderson here talking about it in just a few conferences ago. Like, this should not be an unclear issue for Latter-day Saints.
Have we strayed so far from God's second great commandment, love thy neighbor, that a baby in a womb no longer qualifies to be loved, at least as the mother's neighbor?
What is happening to our appreciation of the sanctity of human life? Abortion is an evil, stark and real and repugnant, which is sweeping over the earth. I plead with the women of this church to shun it, to stand above it, to stay away from those compromising situations which make it appear desirable.
Again, it seems pretty clear. It seems pretty clear. All right. I'm going to go on here. For the sake of time, I might. Do you want me to hit the one on the early feminist stuff? Is that one really important, or would you rather move on to the?
I don't think so.
I think I'm going to move on to the clip number 7 here. Talks a little bit about agency and respecting agency and how that kind of plays into this, at least from the perspective of the Faith Matters hosts. So let's play this clip.
How do you see theology playing out in this issue?
We do believe that life is sacred and needs to be protected. We acknowledge some truly exceptional exceptions, but I think what makes it coherent, at least for me, is the doctrine of agency. We just think that the choice to procreate is the choice to engage in procreative acts, right? That's when you exercise that choice, not later on when.
Yes, amen. Thank you. Just so we all are aware, I actually, just so everyone knows, the 2 people being interviewed are actually far more, they're very nice, and maybe we have some issues there, but they actually, if you watch the interview, come on the right side here. But let's continue the clip. Sorry, I had to pause there just to give them a little cheer.
The consequences of those actions come into play, and there's another life.
So for someone who also it feels so committed to agency that's the part that feels broken to them, that they're feeling like they're forced to use their body to save a life. How do you use this paradigm of agency to respond to that?
It's a very difficult question, right? And the exceptions that church doctrine and policy recognize are exceptions where there really wasn't agency in the choice.
Luke, I'll give you the floor on this one.
Yeah, I mostly took this one to kind of point out, first of all, the direction that the hosts are trying to go with this, which is kind of crazy. And then the fact that when she says, well, what about the people who are saying this agency and their bodies being hijacked? You kind of have the famous violinist thought experiment that people bring up sometimes of, well, if you wake up and you've been knocked out and you're hooked up to this famous violinist and that's the only thing keeping them alive, can you take the IV out, or are you legally required to stay? It's like, well, no, it's a completely different. You already used the choice, as we've said several times. And the thing is, he gets to that answer, but first he apologizes for needing to give that answer.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's very, and I cut out some stuff because I just left in the part where he said, well, this is very difficult, but ultimately your analogy makes no sense.
It's not difficult at all. It's not difficult at all. Okay, real quick.
If you look at the actual clip, he says, well, it's very difficult and I'm not a woman. I'm never going to have to go through this. But, he so, and that's the problem is, no, you could just say, no, that was a horrible analogy that you just gave. And here's why. Here's the very clear distinction, apples and oranges. And we don't need to apologize for it.
And people use that thing like, well, you're not forced to keep another life alive. I'm sorry. I am legally required to feed my children. And I have to use my body to go out and work and do things to provide for my children to live. Okay. And I'm totally fine with that. I'm fine with forcing parents who have children to actually take care of their child, whether you're feeding them in utero or whether you're going to the grocery store and buying them cereal to eat. You are having to provide for your child. And yes, you are legally obligated to keep your child alive. Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, and I love, there's a quote from President Nelson I wanted to include. He says, when the controversies about abortion are debated, individual right of choice is invoked as though it were the one supreme virtue. And that could only be true if one person were involved, but a woman's choice for her own body does not include the right to deprive her baby of life and a lifetime of choices that her child would make. So when she tries to assert that agency is broken, because we're asserting that, that baby has a right to live and that is not an available choice. No, it's not broken. It's not broken at all. It's very, very clear that baby's right to live.
And just the whole idea of pro-choice. Remember, anytime somebody says pro-choice, here's what you look at them and you say, choice to do what?
Mm-hmm.
No one is pro-choice. Like, you can choose to be racist. You can choose. It's literally, it was the same argument they used in the South to defend slavery. They said, well, I don't agree with slavery, but it's their choice. No, in matters of human rights, in matter of rights like to life, the basic right of all, you don't have a choice. Like, we don't have, like, your choice is that you have to respect that life. That is the law, and that is what we believe in protecting. We do not believe in a radical notion of choice. And Elder Oaks gave this excellent talk on this very subject, and I'm gonna play a little clip from it.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Cleverly, those who sought and now defend legalized abortion on demand have moved the issue away from a debate on the moral, ethical, and medical pros and cons of legal restrictions on abortion, and have focused the debate on the slogan or issue of choice. The slogan or sound.
Is that not exactly what they did in this conversation? They moved it away from the baby and the moral implications of that action to a discussion about all these other things and the choices around them, right? So I just want to point that out, that I thought that was very close to what they were doing. So I'll continue with the clip.
Soundbite, pro-choice, has had an almost choice. The slogan or soundbite, pro-choice, has had an almost magical effect in justifying abortion and in neutralizing opposition to it. Pro-choice slogans have been particularly seductive to Latter-day Saints because we know that moral agency, which can be described as the power of choice, is a fundamental necessity in the gospel plan. But being pro-choice on the need for moral agency does not end the matter for us. Choice is a method, not the ultimate goal. We are accountable for our choices, and only righteous choices will move us toward our eternal goals.
Ooh, he nailed it.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that just because he's President Oaks or Elder Oaks. I'm saying it because that's a great argument that he just made, theologically speaking.
Mm-hmm. And I want to provide additional clarity on these exceptions, because I think sometimes we think in our minds, there's these exceptions, so that means automatically if A, B, or C has happened to you, you just walk into the abortion clinic and get it. But that's not the church's position. If we look at the official church handbook, and they put this out in Newsroom also, it lists the exceptions, and then it says even these exceptions do not automatically justify abortion. Abortion is a most serious matter. It should be considered only after the person responsible have received confirmation through prayer. Members may counsel with their bishops as part of this process.
And
to me, I see that as we have these exceptions because within these exceptions, 20% of those people would be justified in getting an abortion, or at least not condemned for getting an abortion.
Well, and this is,
but I think people automatically think, oh, there's an exception, so 100% of the time it's completely fine if that thing has happened. It's like, no, our position's even more firmly against abortion than that. Mm-hmm. It's only a certain segment of that small segment of pregnancies could even fall under this.
And it falls, and to be fair somewhat to the people in the podcast, one of the points that softly got brought up, but was a very good point, was that the church's exceptions relate to the areas where it was not a choice. There wasn't a choice involved, such as someone who was raped or in other certain instances. But you're right. The church does not automatically approve those in those cases. And it says if at best these can be justified situations where the matter can be justified. Mm-hmm. It isn't a moral good. It's never a moral good. But sometimes it's like war. War is not something that we ever say is a good. It's something that can be justified under certain extreme circumstances. And that's, so far as I can tell, the church's position on abortion. And it has extremely limited cases in which that is the case. Whereas 95 to 97% of the abortions that are out there that are happening are not that. And I say, what do we want? We just want sensible abortion controls. Because we want to protect the innocent life that is, I know. Go ahead.
It's very consistent, with the law. The law allows the killing of another human being for self-defense. Okay, so when you have those exceptions of life of a mother or a forcible act like that. It's very consistent, right? Morally, it's very, very consistent. But the church is so clear on what we call elective abortion. The church uses that term as well. And the statistics are actually quite high. They're well over 98% that fall into that elective, social convenience, personal reasons. And boy, the church statement
I wanted
is
to become a famous actor.
Yeah, must not submit to, perform, arrange for, pay for, consent to, or encourage an abortion. I mean, that statement is so clear. And I think a lot of our members who are saying, well, it's an agency and I wouldn't have one, but it's okay for everybody else to have one. I'm sorry, which part of that sentence wasn't clear? It is so clear on what our duty is as saints to speak out for pro-life.
And to be clear, people like President Nelson also bring the law into this. It's not like tithing. Like, yeah, you need to pay tithing to go to the temple, but we're not going to try to bring that as a constitutional amendment. It's like, no, we lament abortion being legalized in the law and wish it was changed.
We're gonna go into that. That'll be the last segment here. I'm gonna play this last clip, and then I actually am going to, after this, we're gonna talk a little bit about the law stuff. So let me real quick play this clip.
This could really break down and become,
Sorry. They're talking about how if Roe gets overturned, how this, oh boy, it could get really polarizing. Okay.
This could really break down and become, maybe we start legislating contraception, or it seems like there's an extreme on either end that could be really problematic. Yes. So how would you like to see people approach this if this becomes something that states are legislating?
We do not want increased division around this. And that is the risky point that we're at. And so we can say,
oh, that is such a Mormon response. That is such a Mormon response. We do not want people to not be on, everyone to be divided over the killing of babies. Like, that is just, we don't want division, as if division is the greatest sin of all sins.
Oh my gosh.
When Jesus Christ said very much, no, like, I'm here to, like, my truth will divide you. I come to bring a sword. The truth on these sorts of moral imperatives will divide people, and there will be sheep and there will be goats. There will be wheat and there will be tares. I'm sorry. When it comes to the sanctity of life, there is a right and wrong answer. Okay, so being, oh no, this might create division. Bring the division, please, because it's an issue that is worth being divided over by. It's like people saying over slavery. Well, if we outlaw slavery, there could be great division created. Oh, anyway, sorry. I'll continue this clip.
I know you care about women. I care about women too. Let's come together to figure out how to best address those needs.
If Roe and Casey get overturned at the end of June, then that triggers a free-for-all of what I would call ideological grandstanding.
Yeah.
On both sides, right? So we control this state legislature, and we are going to show our bona fides to the cause by adopting the most extreme
it's almost
legislation
hard to see how that is not going to happen.
And I just really hope that we don't do that. I hope that we can see beyond that and say, well, what will actually make society better. We're not being unfaithful to our doctrine. We've said this for years, right? President Hinckley was great at saying, you can connect with others and reach them without making any compromise of your doctrine. And so when President Oak says, contested issues we seek to moderate and to unify, is not at all saying that we dilute or abandon our principles. He's saying that is one of our principles. We don't get a pass from behaving with Christian compassion and charity because we're on the right side of a political issue, right?
Buh. I'm sorry. I'll let Marilee, I saw you making some faces during that. What are your thoughts?
Sorry. I mean, I work in in legislative pro-life work. I work on this all the time. And this whole, let's just come together and compromise. Let me tell you, when we're discussing bills, there is no compromising with Planned Parenthood or with the other organizations that are out there killing babies. There is no compromise. There is no middle ground, kumbaya, let's work things out. It is so starkly clear of we want to save babies' lives and they don't. And so this whole notion of heaven forbid that we should do any laws that are the least bit contentious or unsatisfactory to the opposition. I'm sorry. I channel Captain Moroni. I mean, I channel Captain Moroni. I don't sit there and sit down with the kingmen or sit down with the Lamanites and try to have this little kumbaya. I just happened to just read this in the Book of Mormon. I mean, it's clear of lives are at stake. Dramatic action is necessary. It is clear. Pick a side.
Well, and the thing is people will make the case that this isn't like Latter-day Saints, and they get really shaky about political matters. Okay. But this is a moral matter where we're utilizing the law to protect human life. And the church has been very clear on the legality of this. And that the church wants to legally curtail abortion. And I would imagine, it just logically follows, to curtail things legally to align with what the Lord has revealed about it, which means abortion is outlawed except for in those particular cases. And for those who say, well, that's you legislating the church's morality, I say, yes, it is. And it should be legislated because it is about the protection of human life. If I don't get to legislate according to the moral dictates, the thing is here's the thing with politics and religion, because I've thought a lot about this. Okay. The reality is all law is based on moral presuppositions. Okay. That's the basis of law. Anyone who studies moral philosophy and legal philosophy understands that. The question is what moral philosophy will be put into place. Now, within ours, we actually believe within our religious convictions in liberty. In other words, we believe in allowing people to do things that may be immoral so long as those actions do not harm another person. It's the old, you have a right to swing your fist. We believe that, but it stops when it hits my face, right? You can do that. We believe in liberty. And because and that's a religious principle. Liberty is a religious principle. When you advocate for liberty, you are advocating a religious principle, a principle that, frankly, is fairly new on the scene as far as political philosophy goes. And it was brought primarily through the Protestant Reformation and the ensuing era after that. So I just get really annoyed with it. But the church, on the matter of legalization when it comes to abortion, has been quite clear. And I want to play a few clips for those who don't necessarily think that's the case.
Worldwide, there are estimated to be more than 40 million abortions per year. Many laws permit or even promote abortion, but to us, this is a great evil.
How late?
Okay, I'm going to continue here. I'm going to hit a few of these kind of quick ones. This video has a few different clips in it that are broken up, but I have other things where people are advocating for abortion. I'm contrasting that with what the prophets say. But anyway, I'm just going to actually here, I'll go. I'm just going to do the prophets, what they say.
I master.
Yep, I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
But what impropriety could now legalize that which has been forbidden by the laws of God from the dawn of time?
Where it's obvious that a woman is about to get
into a concept, reasoning has transformed mythical concepts.
And the woman.
I understand that. I'm asking if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
What twisted reasoning has transformed mythical concepts into contorted slogans ascending to a practice which is consummately wrong? It is a war on the defenseless, on the voiceless. It is a war on the unborn. 64% of the world's population now live in countries that legally sanction this practice.
If I get elected President of the United States and the Supreme Court overrules Roe v. Wade, I'm going to send legislation to the United States Congress to pass it and codify it.
If we accept that a mother can kill even her own child, how can we tell other people not to kill each other? Any country that accepts abortion is not teaching its people to love, but to use any violence to get what they want.
For the wrath of God is provoked by governments that sponsor gambling, condone pornography or legalize abortion.
I don't know about you guys. That was pretty clear to me. They were talking about the law. They weren't just talking about it in your personal lives. The wrath of God is kindled against nations who legalize abortion. That's the word of our living prophet.
Now that we bring in what I've seen happen before, Mary Lee, you might have seen this happen before. They say, okay, granted, but some of these laws are bad. Some of them don't permit the exceptions to the extent that the church does. Or some of them might, I don't know if this is actually passed or just sort of their fantasy, but some of them might persecute the woman for this. It's like, okay, so it's deeply evil. You agree with that. But then our solution is we have to get the exact right law or you're going to oppose it vehemently. Like, no, that's not how working out solutions to problems works. It's a concept I've been thinking about, a type 1 and a type 2 error. Are we going to, it's a false negative or a true positive, a false positive type of idea. Are you going to err on the side of being too firm on abortion? Or are we going to kill another 60 million babies? It's like, I don't think that's if you have to choose between the two, I don't see how you can make the case that, no, we need to stay with the killing 60 million babies because maybe the punishment's going to be too hard for the women if we outlaw it. It just doesn't make sense. But people think it makes sense and trot it out there. At least I've seen all the time.
Yeah, we've had that happen, and we have them say, and even within the pro-life people, there are differing opinions of regarding the exceptions. Some are, well, it's a life. Why is that different if she was raped or if she wasn't? And it's been very, very interesting watching children who are the products of rape come forward and say, my life matters. And so, yes, I get that. But to literally throw the baby out with the bathwater and try to oppose these because they aren't quite as specific as we want. Yeah, I agree. That's the wrong answer as well.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when the option is, well, this could be hard on some women, or let's kill 63 million more babies. I'm sorry, guys. Like if you have to weigh that in the scales, because that's one of the challenges with politics. In politics, you do have to compromise to come up with the best law that you can actually get passed. Okay, that's it. But if you are arguing that 63 million babies, that's about as bad as it gets. Okay.
And you're young pups, so you don't remember what I remember, having lived through these times when Roe v. Wade was first proposed, and the whole abortion movement was moving forward. At that point, if I recall, it was legal in about 20 states, 30 states still opposed. And the argument over and over was, we want abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. Over and over, they said that. I'm sorry, 73 million a year is not rare. There are 144 million live births every year. And then another 73 million pregnancies are ended in abortion, with them killing the baby. And so I talk to young people and they say, a third of my generation is dead. They're already dead.
Crazy.
That's third.
And then you have hosts on Faith Matters saying the strongest argument for the pro-choice position is that this creates power symmetry between men and women by allowing them to do that. You know what creates power symmetry between men and women is when you actually get married and you enjoy the legal protections that marriage gives to both men and women within that marital arrangement. You know what else creates it is when you honor each other, when you work as equal partners within your marriage. Marriage is the institution here. What's really funny is this: for all those who like to complain about the Family Proclamation, it is the Family Proclamation and the principles in that proclamation that lead to not needing the abortions. One of the big topics that they talk about in that conversation the whole time was about how do we create connection and prevent this and all of that. And never once did they say marriage. Mm-hmm. You guys, we're Latter-day Saints. Like, we know the answer to this question. Why are we acting like it's not? And then downplaying it as though it's some really complicated, we got to make connections. And it's like, you know what makes a connection with another human being? When you go and sit across each other in an altar and you engage in sacred covenants with one another, pledging your lives to each other. Okay. And fine, if you're not a Latter-day Saint, within the institution of marriage as a whole, but marriage no longer matters in our society. And people poo-poo the family proclamation.
And I'll quickly share a story. We run a mobile clinic in front of Planned Parenthood where the women are going in to get an abortion. 80% of the women that enter our van and see an ultrasound of their baby choose life. And they were walking in the door to abort their baby. So one came in with a CTR ring with her boyfriend. And my friend who runs the mobile clinic noticed this and said, "Are you LDS?" And she said, "Well, yeah. And my dad's a sealer in the temple." And here they were walking in to get an abortion. So they were able to see the ultrasound of the baby, realize that they couldn't kill it, and then work together to come up with a solution, which she said, we listed all the ways we would help. They got married a few months ago. They're expecting their baby. To watch that situation turn around for those two, their families stepped forward. They got married. They made those commitments. It is night and day. That is the appropriate solution. If you can, and if you don't, there's wonderful adoption. In fact, my friend that did the intervention there was adopted. And so you see these wonderful, empowering, positive, doctrinally aligned, sound with Heavenly Father's will. These are the choices that they need to make. These are the alternatives. And we as members can step forward and offer that love and support to move forward in a more positive way. It makes all the difference.
Absolutely. Luke, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, hold on, I have to grab it again. Actually, first I'd be, because I think this was before we started recording, I'd be interested in hearing on this podcast so others can hear it, Mary Lee's evaluation of where people's stances in the church here right now. Like, are people actually know what's being taught in General Conference, or do they have this faith matters kind of woo-woo concept of abortion?
Isn't everyone in the church is pro-life and agrees with everything we're saying, right?
And it's interesting, we created this organization, Latter-day Saints for Life, just last fall. Since November, we now have members in 32 states and 6 countries already. It's exploding. For this very reason, and the reason we created that organization was the vast majority of young people that we encounter are pro-abortion. They couch it in that agency. They couch it in, I wouldn't do it, but I'm pro-choice for everyone else. They couch it in all those lovely euphemisms that make them feel better about what they're saying. But the truth of the matter is we are hitting majority numbers. And we have shared this with the leaders of the church, and that's now being discussed at very high levels because of this realization. Part of the difficulty with that is the church doesn't always talk about it very overtly from General Conference, although we have Elder Anderson's wonderful talk recently on the topic. Even though we have the proclamation in the family, we have the scriptures, we have all of these things that are wonderful, somehow the young people who are hearing the messages from social media, their friends, their public school, Planned Parenthood,
or like the message that we just heard on the faith,
right? Or even I was just going to say, even within the church, with members with this wishy-washy messaging. So a lot of them have been deceived and led into thinking that that's in alignment and that's the way that the doctrine should be. And we have families that don't want to talk about anything political, or families that don't want to talk about controversial topics. And so it isn't necessarily being taught clearly in the homes either. And so we have a couple of generations now that are very confused, very deceived. This is very dangerous. We created this organization to promote the doctrine of the church solidly. In fact, if you go look on latterdaysaintsforlife.org, we just put up a doctrinal library with all the over 300 citations of scriptures, General Conference, handbooks, seminary lesson, on and on and on, clear as a bell on there, that you can see the doctrine and the position of the church so that there is no question. And you have one place to look. But we encounter, it's, I'm pro-choice, or we encounter, there's no problem here. All is well in Zion. Nothing's happening. We're encountering both of those. And so we're just kind of forging ahead with preach and teach and adhere to the doctrines of the church. That is the path of love and safety and eternal, life. So that's what we're doing. And because of that very reason.
Well, I'm glad we were able to have you on to talk about that, because I want for our listeners to support that. And we all need to recognize that there are areas that can be ambiguous, but I'm sorry, abortion is not one of those. It is a clear moral issue. The prophets have spoken very clearly on it. And frankly, with those who are on the Faith Matters podcast, I do want to recognize that I don't want this to make it out like that interview, they were all like at the end, like, yeah, women should totally have the choice to kill their baby. Like, that wasn't. But what we can see is this soft playing of it. And frankly, if any of the anyone who's involved in that podcast in any way, if you feel misrepresented, if we feel we didn't, present this right, if we feel like we didn't, we're missing something, please reach out to me. I'll include my email in the description to the video here, and you guys can come on the show and we can talk about this and we can clarify it, because at the end of the day, I hope all of us as Latter-day Saints want to be clear on what the truth is in relation to these matters and not muddy them. And so if we can create conversation that clarifies and looks at the disagreements, if there are any, I think that's a good thing. So anyway, thank you all for joining us, and thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it. I hope you all have a great day.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jacob.
So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.